Vasa recta is nothing but the tissues that are present just adjacent to the Henle's loop in the kidney. Sodium chloride and urea are the two important components that help in actually maintaining the concentration of the filtrate or the osmolarity. How is this osmolarity maintained? It is maintained mainly because of the concentration of the sodium chloride and urea in the urine filtrate. Osmoreceptors are present in the somewhere in the hypothalamus region of the brain. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to another session on chapter 19, that is excretory products and their elimination. I am Dr. Divya, Biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about the formation of the urine or the filtration of the urine, and we had also studied about the functions of the different tubules that are present in the kidney. In today's session, we shall discuss about the concentration of the urine, how exactly the urine gets concentrated so that it can be eliminated out of the body, and also we can study about the regulation of the kidney function, which parts or hormones are actually responsible for maintaining a balance in the kidney function for proper urine formation to occur. So to begin with the session, we shall start with the mechanism of concentration of the filtrate. So in the previous session, we had studied about the urine formation, right? And that especially we had studied about three important steps, that is glomerular filtration, reabsorption, and then the secretion, which takes place in the Henle's loop mainly. So in today's session, we shall discuss how exactly the filtrate that is there, which is nothing but the urine, gets concentrated, because the amount of urine that we eliminate out of our body is in the concentrated form. It is never in a diluted form. So how exactly this concentration occurs, we shall study. So mammals have the ability to produce concentrated urine, and the Henle's loop and the vasa recta are the ones that actually plays a very important role in the concentration of the urine. So we have the Henle's loop here. So these part of the kidneys are nothing but the Henle's loop. So Henle's loop is nothing but it is the connectivity between the glomerulus and then or the Bowman's capsule with that of the collecting duct. So that Henle's loop, it has a ascending limb as well as a descending limb. So ascending limb is this side of the Henle's loop is the ascending limb, and the other side wherein the urine descends or flows downwards, it is the descending limb, and it is in this portion of the Henle's loop that is the concentration of the urine actually occurs. And not just that, even vasa recta also plays a very important role in concentrating the urine. So vasa recta is nothing but the tissues that are present just adjacent to the Henle's loop in the kidney. So there it helps in maintaining a concentration gradient and all that. We shall study about that later on. So the flow of filtrate in the two limbs of the Henle's loop is in opposite direction, and therefore it is called as a counter current mechanism. So I told you the Henle's loop has a descending limb and an ascending limb. So will the urine filtrate that is there flow in one direction here? No, right? In the descending limb, it flows downwards, and in the ascending limb, it flows upwards, wherein it will reach the convoluted tubule and then it will enter into the collecting duct. So therefore here the flow is in opposite direction. Here it is moving downwards. On the ascending limb of the Henle's or ascending loop of the Henle's, it is moving upwards. So therefore such a mechanism of flow of urine is called as the counter current mechanism. So in this particular session we shall discuss about the counter current mechanism that occurs in the Henle's loop and the vasa recta. So when this counter current mechanism occurs, it is at that time the concentration of the urine actually occurs. So the flow of blood through the two limbs of vasa recta is also a counter current pattern. So not just the flow of the filtrate or the urine, but the flow of the blood here is also a counter current mechanism. The proximity between the Henle's loop and the vasa recta, as well as The counter current mechanism in them is the one that actually helps in maintaining an increasing osmolarity towards the inner medullary interstitium. So, the concentration has to be maintained. It is not that the urine should not get diluted. If it gets diluted, what happens is the person has to rush to the bathroom every now and then. So that is the reason the urine shouldn't get diluted. It should always be in a concentrated form, or the osmolarity of the urine or the concentration of the urine should always be maintained. So if the osmolarity has to be maintained in an increasing order, then it is the distance between, or the proximity or the closeness between the Henle's loop and the vasa recta along with the counter current mechanism. So what is the counter current mechanism occurring there? It is the descending movement of the urine filtrate and the ascending movement of the urine filtrate in opposite direction, right? So all that will actually maintain the Henle's loop in such a way that the urine concentration or the osmolarity of the urine keeps on increasing towards the inner medullary interstitium. So, inner medullary interstitium region of the kidney. So, the inner medullary interstitium, it is nothing but the tissue that is surrounding the loop of the Henle's. So, all the tissues that are surrounding the loop of the Henle's towards the region of the medulla of the kidney, it is called as the inner medullary interstitium. And here the osmolarity is maintained, or the concentration of the urine filtrate is maintained in such a way that is from 300 osmolarity per liter in the cortex to about 1200 osmolarity in the inner medulla. So, in the inner medulla, how much is the osmolarity maintained? It is 1200 osmol per liter. So, that is how much it is maintained. But in the case of the cortex, how much is the osmolarity maintained? The osmolarity that is maintained is about 300 osmolarity. So, 300 osmol per liter is maintained. So much concentration should always be maintained in the cortex of the kidney or the medulla or the inner medullary interstitial region of the kidney. So much is the, or inner medulla of the kidney. So much concentration has to be maintained. So this osmolarity, if it is maintained, it means that the kidney function is healthy. So this gradient is mainly caused by sodium chloride and urea. How is this concentration maintained? How is this osmolarity maintained? It is maintained mainly because of the concentration of the sodium chloride and urea in the urine filtrate. So here what happens? So here sodium chloride is transported by the ascending limb of Henle's loop. So if you can see here, this is the ascending limb of Henle's loop, because ascending means moving upward. So this is the ascending limb of Henle's loop. Here the sodium chloride concentration has to be maintained in the medulla of the kidney, right? What is medulla? Medulla is nothing but the tissue or the region surrounding the Henle's loop. So if the sodium chloride concentration has to be maintained, that is sodium chloride is transported by the ascending limb of the Henle's loop, and this sodium chloride is exchanged with the descending limb of vasa recta. If you can see here, they get exchanged with the descending limb of the vasa recta. So that is how exactly the concentration is maintained. And then the sodium chloride is returned to the interstitium by the ascending portion of the vasa. So this is the ascending portion of the vasa recta, and this one is the descending portion. And the sodium chloride is returned back. If you can see here from the vasa recta, you can see the sodium chloride moving out from the ascending limb. That is, it is given back to the inner medulla so that the concentration gradient can be maintained. So that is how the sodium chloride is one of the important component that actually helps in maintaining the concentration of the urine or the osmolarity in the Henle's loop. Similarly, small amounts of urea. So we heard about sodium chloride, right? So what happens to urea? So when sodium chloride is moving out of the ascending limb of the vasa recta and then entering into the medulla region of the kidney, small amounts of urea will enter into the thin segments of the ascending Henle's loop, and here it is transported back to the interstitium by the collecting duct. So here what happens, as you can see, urea will get collected. Small amounts of urea will start entering into the ascending limb of the Henle's loop. So this is the ascending limb of the Henle's loop. It will start entering into the ascending limb of the Henle's loop, from where it will start entering into the ascending limb of the Henle's loop from the collecting duct. So sodium chloride comes out into the medulla, and from the collecting duct the urea enters into the ascending loop, where it is transported back to the interstitium by the collecting duct. So much, this is the process that actually occurs for the concentration of the urine. So we need to understand that here sodium chloride and urea are the two important components that help in actually maintaining the concentration of the filtrate or the osmolarity. That is, I told you, right, that is in the inner medulla region of the kidney, 1200 osmolarity per liter should be maintained, and the cortex 300 osmolarity should be maintained. So this should be maintained throughout. That is how, and if this osmolarity has to maintain, sodium chloride and urea are the ones that actually play a very important role, wherein the exchange between the sodium chloride with that of the vasa recta and the inner medulla occurs. From the vasa recta it moves to the inner medulla, and the urea from the collecting duct, it will move into the inner medulla. So therefore this movement of the sodium chloride and the urea, now concentration is maintained in the inner medulla. Therefore the osmolarity of 1200 osmolarity per liter is maintained in the inner medulla. So the above whatever transport we had learnt about is actually facilitated by special arrangement of the Henle's loop and the vasa recta, and it is the counter current mechanism. So this counter current, that is the ascending movement and the descending movement. So what happens here? Again the movement of water also occurs. So while maintaining this osmolarity, the outward movement of water also occurs. The outward movement of water, that is the water should come out of the Henle's loop. Why? Because I told you the concentration of the urine should be highly concentrated. But if water is there in the urine filtrate, then the urine will become diluted. So therefore the water has to also come out of the Henle's loop in this particular case. So therefore this mechanism helps to maintain a concentration gradient in the medullary interstitium, and the presence of such interstitial gradient or concentration gradient in the medullary interstitium, it helps in an easy passage of water from the collecting tubule, therefore concentrating the filtrate. So I told you water should also leave the Henle's loop or the collecting tubule. So if that water has to leave, then this process, that is maintaining of the concentration gradient in the interstitial medulla or the inner medulla of the kidney, has to occur. And if this concentration in the inner medulla of the kidney has to be maintained, then the proper presence of sodium chloride and urea in the inner medulla is very, very important. Therefore, this will draw out the water from the collecting tubule of the kidney or from the Henle's loop of the kidney. So human kidneys, it can produce urine nearly 4 times concentrated than the initial filtrate that is formed. So the initial filtrate that is formed is not that concentrated, right? But the urine that comes out of the body, it is in a highly concentrated form. It is because of this osmolarity gradient that actually helps in maintaining the concentration of the urine. So this was about the mechanism of concentration of the filtrate. So we need to understand here, it is the vasa recta and the Henle's loop that actually mainly participates in the concentration of the urine, wherein there is exchange of the sodium chloride, movement of the urea and all that into the inner medulla of the kidney, therefore concentrating or maintaining the osmolarity in the inner medulla of the kidney. And this inner osmolarity or the concentration gradient is the one that actually, and the countercurrent mechanism is the one that actually draws out the water from the Henle's loop, therefore further concentrating the urine, and this concentrated urine moves into the collecting duct, it gets collected there and then it comes out of the body. So that is how this whole process occurs. It is between the vasa recta, the Henle's loop, the countercurrent mechanism occurring in them, and the osmolarity that is maintained in the inner medulla or the inner medullary interstitial part of the kidney. So that is how mechanism of concentration of the filtrate actually occurs. So now we should understand how is this whole process maintained. How is the function of the kidney actually regulated? What are the parts or what are the hormones that are responsible for regulating this particular function? So the function of the kidney is efficiently monitored and regulated by hormonal feedback mechanism. So the whole functioning of the kidney depends on the hormones. What are those hormones? Which region of our brain produces this hormone? All that we shall look into. So here, these hormones are actually produced by the hypothalamus region of the brain. Not just that, in the kidney also, the juxtaglomerular apparatus that is there in the kidney also produces these hormones, and to a certain extent, the heart also helps in producing the hormone or regulating the functioning of the kidney. So therefore, what did we understand? The regulation of the function of the kidney is mainly because of the hormones that are produced or the hormone feedback mechanism that is produced by the hypothalamus part of the brain, the juxtaglomerular apparatus that is present in the kidney, and or the nephron, which is the functional unit of the kidney, and also to some extent the heart also plays a major role here. So you'll understand exactly how the heart plays a major role here in the coming slides. Here, our body consists of certain osmoreceptors. So osmoreceptors in the body gets activated. So where exactly these osmoreceptors are present? These osmoreceptors are present in the somewhere in the hypothalamus region of the brain. So they are the ones that actually receives the signals for the osmoregulation process to occur. So these osmoreceptors in the body, they are activated by certain changes in the blood volume. Not just that, in the body fluid volume and also in the ionic concentration. And here, whenever there is an excessive loss of fluid from the body, these osmoreceptors get activated, and when these osmoreceptors which are present in the hypothalamus get activated, in turn they will stimulate or activate the hypothalamus to release certain hormones which is called as vasopressin, and these vasopressin hormones are also called as antidiuretic hormone, or it is also called vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone, which is released from the neurohypophysis region of the hypothalamus. So here I told you hormones are the ones that actually regulate the function of the kidney. Which hormone? It is the antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin. So from where is this hormone released? How it gets released? So whenever there is a change in the blood volume or the amount of blood that is present, and also amount of blood volume means amount of blood volume, because we had studied that vasa recta and the Henle's loop, they not just help in the countercurrent mechanism or countercurrent flow of blood, but also the urine, right? So here, urine means the body fluid. Blood volume also, when it changes and when the ionic concentration also changes, at that time what happens? The osmoreceptors that are present in the hypothalamus region of the brain, they get activated. When they get activated, they stimulate the hypothalamus part of the brain to secrete a particular hormone which is called as the antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin. Now we know that the antidiuretic hormone and the vasopressin has been secreted by the hypothalamus of the brain. Now what happens with that? We shall see. Now when this antidiuretic hormone gets secreted, water reabsorption from the tubule will occur, thereby preventing diuresis. So here diuresis is nothing but the removal of excess body fluid from a body. But removal of excess body fluid will lead to dehydration. But will excess of body fluid get removed from a body? No, right? We know that the urine or the body fluid in the body gets removed in the form of concentrated urine, so that only the concentrated urine is lost out of a body and the water is retained back in a body, because it should not lead to dehydration. So that is the function of the ADH hormone. So the hypothalamus gets stimulated, that stimulated hypothalamus will release the hormone, that is antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin. So this antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin, it will facilitate the reabsorption of the water, wherein it will not allow the water to move out of our body, only it will allow the urine to concentrate, and that concentrated urine to get eliminated out of a body. That is, it will prevent diuresis. So what is diuresis? Preventing the loss of excess water from a body fluid from a body is called as diuresis. And an increase in the body fluid volume, this will switch off the osmoreceptors and it will suppress the antidiuretic hormone released to complete the feedback. Now here, every time we don't urinate, right? So at that time, sometimes here, what happens? An increase in the body fluid volume will switch off the osmoreceptors, because when will the osmoreceptors get switched on? Where is the osmoreceptors present? The osmoreceptors are present in the hypothalamus part of the brain. When do these osmoreceptors get switched on? They get switched on whenever there is a change or alteration in the blood flow, in the body fluid flow and the ionic concentration, right? But here, when an increase in the body fluid volume occurs, the osmoreceptors will switch off. That means a decrease in the body fluid volume will actually activate the osmoreceptors, which will prevent diuresis. But in this particular case, whenever there is an increase in the body fluid volume, the osmoreceptors which are present in the hypothalamus part of the brain, they will get switched off, and this switching off will prevent the release of ADH. Why? Because osmoreceptors should get switched on, then the hypothalamus should get activated, and then the hypothalamus will release the ADH hormone, right? But here osmoreceptors itself is getting switched off. So therefore, it will not activate the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus doesn't get activated, the ADH hormone will not get produced here. And ADH can also affect the kidney function by constricting effects on the blood vessels. So here, it will constrict the blood vessel. So when it constricts the blood vessel, or it will make the blood vessels narrow. So when it makes the blood vessels narrow, what happens is, it will create a pressure here. So this will cause an increase in the blood pressure, and an increase in the blood pressure can increase the glomerular blood flow and therefore the glomerular filtration rate. So glomerular filtration rate, we know how much amount of urine should be lost, or body fluid should be lost from a body, which is called as the glomerular filtration rate. If it goes beyond that, it means the ADH hormone is not getting secreted properly. Why? ADH hormone is important for retaining the body fluid and only letting out the concentrated urine to get eliminated out of a body. But here what happens? Improper functioning of or release of the antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin, it will affect the functioning of the kidney. What it will do is, the blood vessels that are there in the kidney, it will make it very narrow. So when it makes the blood vessels narrow, it will affect the countercurrent mechanism of the blood flow. And when this is not happening properly, it will create a increase in the blood pressure. And this blood pressure will increase the movement of the glomerular blood flow, and therefore it will increase the glomerular filtration rate. And that is the time when the person will have to visit the bathroom quite a number of times, and this condition is usually seen in old people. So here the JGA. So now we understood how the brain functions, right? Because I told you the hormones that are released by the brain are one of the important components for regulating the kidney function. So we understood the brain, that is especially the hypothalamus part of the brain. The osmoreceptors will activate the hypothalamus to release the ADH hormone, and that ADH hormone prevents the diuresis process. So much we understood. Now that function we understood, and also we understood if the ADH is not released properly, then what happens we have understood. Now we shall understand what is the function of the JGA, that is the juxtaglomerular apparatus, in regulating the function of the kidney. So the juxtaglomerular apparatus plays a complex regulatory role in maintaining the functioning of the kidney. A fall in the glomerular blood flow or the glomerular blood pressure, it can activate. Now, I told you the blood pressure should not increase. It was the same in the previous case that we had studied, right? Wherein if an increase in the blood pressure occurs or if an increase in the glomerular blood flow occurs, it will increase the glomerular filtration rate, which is a problem to the kidney. The person will have to visit the bathrooms a many number of times than the usual time a healthy person has to do so. So here what happens in the JGA? So in the JGA, a fall in the glomerular blood flow will occur, or when a fall in the glomerular blood flow occurs means a fall in the glomerular blood pressure will occur, and therefore, or we can also put it in this way, the glomerular filtration rate will decrease or it will be maintained. Therefore, it will activate the juxtaglomerular cells to release a special component called as renin. And this renin actually converts a particular hormone that is called as, or a protein which is called as angiotensinogen. It will release the angiotensinogen into the blood, or it will convert the angiotensinogen that is present in the blood into angiotensin 1, and further angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2. So angiotensin is actually a protein hormone that makes the blood vessels narrower here. So what happens? So what happens here in the juxtaglomerular apparatus? The angiotensinogen which is produced by the liver. So the angiotensinogen produced by the liver, it will be released into the blood. In the blood vessel here, what happens? The angiotensinogen gets converted into a protein hormone which is called as angiotensin 1. This angiotensin 1 get converted into angiotensin 2. So this is the process that actually occurs. And angiotensin 2 is the one which actually, it is a powerful vasoconstrictor, means it dilates or it constricts or it makes the blood vessel narrower. That is why it is called as a vasoconstrictor, meaning it makes the blood vessels of the kidney or the juxtaglomerular apparatus in particular narrower, and it increases the glomerular blood pressure and thereby the glomerular filtration rate. So this is a function of the JGA, that is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Next, what happens? Next, I told you angiotensin 1 actually gets converted into angiotensin 2, and angiotensin 2 is a vasoconstrictor which makes the blood vessels narrower, and when the blood vessels becomes narrower, what happens? Increase in the blood pressure will occur, and therefore it will increase the glomerular filtration rate. Apart from that, this angiotensin 2, it also activates the adrenal cortex and therefore releases aldosterone. So adrenal cortex that is present in the kidney or the adrenal gland of the kidney, it actually stimulates the adrenal part of the kidney or the adrenal cortex of the kidney to release a hormone called as aldosterone. And this aldosterone causes the reabsorption of sodium ions and water from the distal parts of the tubule, and therefore it will lead to an increase in the blood pressure and the glomerular filtration rate further. So this complex mechanism is generally known as the renin-angiotensin mechanism. So for renin-angiotensin mechanism to occur, the JGA or the juxtaglomerular apparatus, so the hormone released by the juxtaglomerular apparatus, helps here. So don't get confused here. The hypothalamus part of the brain releases the hormone, antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin, whereas the juxtaglomerular apparatus releases a hormone which is called as angiotensinogen. This angiotensinogen in the blood gets converted to angiotensin 1, and then this angiotensin 1 gets converted into angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 helps in the formation of aldosterone hormone, and this aldosterone hormone is the one, it further constricts or makes the blood vessels narrower, or it is very important vasoconstrictor which further increases the blood pressure and therefore the glomerular filtration rate. So that is how it actually helps. So next, moving on to heart. I told you the heart also plays a very important role to some extent in the regulation of the functioning of the kidney. So an increase in the blood flow to the atria of the heart, that is to the right atrium of the heart. Whenever the blood flow increases to the right atrium of the heart, it causes the release of a atrial natriuretic factor. So here it will release in the stretching of the atrial muscles in the right atrium, therefore causing the release of a atrial natriuretic factor, and this atrial natriuretic factor is also a vasodilator. That is, it helps in making the blood vessels broader, therefore decreasing the blood pressure. That is the difference between a vasoconstrictor and a vasodilator. Vasoconstrictors such as the ADH hormone and the aldosterone, they are vasoconstrictors. They actually constrict or make the blood vessels narrower. But the atrial natriuretic factor that is released by the right atrium or the stretching of the right atrium or because of extra blood flow to the right atrium, it causes vasodilation. That is, it making the blood vessels broader and therefore decreasing the blood pressure. Because we should always remember, when the blood vessels get narrower, the blood pressure increases because the flow of the blood will get slowed down. So that is the reason. And when the blood vessels become broader, the blood pressure decreases because the flow of the blood will be proper there. So that is the reason. And therefore this atrial natriuretic factor causes vasodilation, that is dilation of the blood vessels, and thereby it decreases the blood pressure. And apart from that, this particular atrial natriuretic mechanism, it acts as a check on the renin and angiotensin mechanism. So here both constriction of the blood vessels and the relaxation of the blood vessels, both are very, very important. That is why all the three parts, that is the hypothalamus of the brain, the juxtaglomerular apparatus and the nephron of the kidney, as well as the heart, both should function hand in hand if the regulation or the proper functioning of the kidney has to occur. So this is about the regulation of the kidney function, where three important parts play a very, very important role, especially the hormones released by them play a very, very important role here. So that is how different organs play a very important role here. So I hope you understood this session wherein we studied about the concentration of the urine, because it is very, very important. The diluted form of urine should not leave our body because water has to be retained. So therefore concentration of the urine is very, very important. So how it occurs, we studied, and we also studied about how the hormones released by the brain, the hormones released by the juxtaglomerular apparatus, and to some extent the heart plays a very, very important role in regulating or maintaining the proper functioning of the kidney. Especially we learnt about the renin angiotensin mechanism. This mechanism should be maintained if the proper concentration of the urine has to occur and the concentrated urine has to leave the body. Otherwise, what will happen? If the urine doesn't get concentrated, the person will have to eliminate lots of fluid from the body by frequent visit to the bathroom. So that is why this particular mechanism is very, very important here. So I hope you understood the session well. So we shall meet again in the coming session, wherein we shall discuss about micturition. What is this micturition? And we shall study about the other parts or other organs that are involved in the excretion process. And we also shall study about the various disorders of the kidney. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.